Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Lighthouse Sessions. I'm excited today. I have my new friend, Rory Henry, with me. Rory, why don't you introduce yourself to my audience?
Well, first and foremost, Jeff, thank you for having me on the show. It's a privilege to be on here and talk to you. I am the director at Arrowroot Family Office, and we are a multi-family office. So we deal with families with high net worth all the way down to the average, client out there, the teacher, the nurse practitioner. And then I developed a program called AFO Wealth Management Forward, where I help educate CPAs and accounting professionals on how to integrate holistic wealth management or holistic financial planning services into their practice. So really uniting the two worlds of the CPA, the accounting side with the financial advisory and wealth side. Because I'm sure, as we'll talk about here, Jeff, as technology continues to progress, we'll see integration of services to really help clients make better business and personal financial decisions. And before I go on too long here, I just authored my first book, Holistic Guide to Wealth Management. It's for accounting professionals, integrating services using the behavioral side of advice. And I'm big into behavioral finance, or what we call financial therapy, or many call the psychology of money, which we can discuss.
Yes.
Really helping. Yeah, it's a fascinating field. It's really at the forefront of helping people really understand the relationship to money, but more importantly, Jeff, it's understand the relationship to meaning. So if we can help people really optimize their businesses, optimize their finances, but in the end, really helping them optimize their well-being, I think we can live a better life.
I love that. And there's a lot to unpack in that. And that's what I love about entrepreneurs. We have a lot of interests that all make perfect sense
To
in
us, right?
context. Like, what do you mean?
I have more, Jeff. We want to get into a TV show, technology. I got
didn't
more for
mention
the audience.
The podcast.
The podcast, yeah.
Okay, I have a burning question, and we're just going to go where this takes us. But
Yeah.
you are so I understand certified financial planner. I've met many of those. You are the first behavioral financial advisor. So tell me, how did you go down that path, and what does it mean to people, to the average person who's working with you?
Yeah, it's always a conversation starter, Jeff. And I stumble onto the field. I interviewed on my podcast Dr. Daniel Crosby. He's had New York Times bestselling books. He's the chief behavioral officer at Orion Advisor Solutions, one of the biggest tech platforms in the wealth space. And I came across his work, and I heard him talk about really we need to look at the emotional, psychological aspects of the human behind the data, behind the numbers, to really truly provide valued advice. And so I didn't really understand this. I thought a technical financial plan, I had retirements and Monte Carlo simulations, right? And how much we should be saving and investing. But we really need to make sure that we're understanding the person, their wants, their needs, their fears, and their aspirations. And that's really what behavioral finance is. It's taking traditional finance, which traditional financial metrics, economic metrics really was, we're rational beings. But as you, Jeff, know, and you probably the audience knows, is we're very much irrational beings. We don't make rational decisions. And that is never more obvious than when it comes to our money. Dr. Daniel Crosby actually did or cited some research into brain scans, and more so than politics, more so than sex, more so than chocolate and food, money excites the brain more so than any of those other things. And so, it's really the study of how we make decisions when it comes to our finances. But taking that a little further, it really is about how we can make better decisions in our life.
I love that. And I think so many people give generic advice saying you should do this. That advice is not going to stick unless you know why they do what they do. And I think that's the greatest sin of humanity is we think we're rational and we'll irrationally defend that when in reality we're irrational all day long.
Yeah. The markets show that because people, this is not investment advice. They buy when it's at its heights and they sell it when it's at its lowest point. So, it's really understanding, the human nature, and we have biases, we have heuristics, which are mental shortcuts. But overall, it's really a human first approach in helping people identify ways in which they can make better decisions. And then, as we could probably touch on throughout the podcast, there's studies that were done by folks out there like Hal Hershfield. I cite him in my book. He has a book called Your Future Self. He's a professor over at UCLA, Anderson School of Management. And he did research, Jeff, that shows that we treat our future selves really as no different than a stranger. And to make better choices, we need to have that future self in mind. And so, as cheesy as it may sound, it's really manifesting a future state. So, 10 years from now, where's Jeff? Who's he with? What's he doing? How does he feel? And if we could paint a vivid visual picture of that future self, we'll make better changes in the here and now.
I love that. And if I may, one of my things I do is every day I try to thank past Jeff for the things he did that made today Jeff happy. And again, it's fascinating that if we don't think about it, we can be really unkind to future Rory and future Jeff.
Yeah. I'm a big fan of the book, The Gap and the Gain, Benjamin Hardy. And he talks about how we have so much mental anguish because we're consistently moving the goalpost to that desired future state. So in that sense, that future type of envisioning can cause us a lot of angst. So he says the antidote, and what you just did, Jeff, you did that exercise of really looking backwards and seeing how far we've come. If I could have told Pastor Rory 5 years ago, 2 years ago, that he'd have a book published with 24 plus other thought leaders, I'd be on this podcast speaking to you, Jeff. I'd be like, you're crazy. That's not going to happen. If that happens, I'd be so excited and so happy, right? So I think you're right. It's really looking backwards and seeing how far we've come to have peace of mind when it comes to our endeavors.
I love it. And I find it fascinating. A true entrepreneur, the hardest question is, what do you do? Because it's not a short answer. Let's talk about the book. So you were busy being you had your life and you had your plan. You sort of thought this is where it's going. How did the book come about? And what were your big lessons from the book? And full disclosure, Rory, I personally believe every entrepreneur should have a book.
Yeah. Well, I believe everybody should have a book. I think everybody should go to therapy for the most part, and people should write their book. I'm actually working on a project with some behavioral scientists as well as some Hollywood award-winning writers about how we could have our stories told and looking at our past, the relationship to money, and then outlining that future and using the power of narrative to help people tell their stories so they can not only understand more about themselves, but also empower others by telling their own stories. My book endeavor came about. So about 8 years ago, I built a tax practice management technology. I won't bore your audience too much because I saw that accountants and CPAs, they have the trust of the client. They had a great relationship, but they just weren't efficient with technology. There's actually wasn't really a CRM in the tax and accounting space, to believe it or not. So I saw a pain point there for accountants and tax professionals to provide greater value by just making it more efficient and having a CRM. At that same time, there was a competitor that raised $77 million and spent it on sales and marketing. And so I went out to the venture community. They said, Rory, it's a great idea. We're not going to put our money behind a young buck like you. So my dreams of a technology were dashed. But that's when I came to learn about the work that we do here at the family office and how technology was advancing on the personal finance side. So I really set out, actually, you know what? I asked the question, why don't CPAs and financial advisors work together? One decision really affects another. And I saw the work that we do with families here at the family office, and we're really making sure that we're taking care of their business as well as their personal finances. So I set out to answer that question and build a thought leadership and methodology to really integrate the CPA and financial advisor worlds. And so I did that. I developed a podcast. I interviewed some of the brightest minds in the accounting space, in the wealth space, with behavioral finance, technology, Wall Street Journal, Forbes, all those people. And I said I need to put a blueprint together and really a roadmap for folks to be able to do this. And so I went to inquire about writing a book. And I started writing, and then I realized quickly, Jeff, that there's a lot of information in all financial services.
Yeah.
You think about tax, accounting, insurance, investments, estate planning, exit planning. And I obviously don't know every single one of those subjects. I'm pretty bright in a lot of them.
Yeah.
So I said, I need to get together a dream team of folks to help me write this book. So I went out and got CEOs of major tech companies, thought leaders within the accounting and wealth management space to help write the book, either co-author chapters or write chapters themselves, to really talk about integrating these services and how we can do this in a holistic and authentic way, to be able to provide greater value to our clients and help them understand more about themselves and really help them meet their goals and aspirations.
I love it. And for what it's worth, when you booked me on the show, I looked at the table of contents, and I'm a refugee from the accounting world. I'm a recovering accountant, and a lot of those names I recognize and I deeply respect. And Ron Baker is one of my favorite people on the planet. The stuff he's forgotten more about pricing than most people will ever know.
Right.
And it's funny because you got to take notes even when you're talking to him, because he just drops gems all over.
I know. I mean, he's big on the experience economy and really guiding transformations, and that's what we talk about through the book. I cite Ron in the chapter about pricing and value in the future advice, and he talks about the concierge doctor, how concierge doctors really have intimate knowledge of their patients. I think on the finance side, we can have intimate knowledge of them financially, and we can help them make better decisions by having a deeper understanding of that human behind the numbers.
Now, you and I were meant to have this conversation clearly, because one of the things that fascinates me is a lot of accountants. So I'm going to share this, and I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah.
A lot of accountants think that if they give their client to a wealth manager, a lot of times that wealth manager will move the client to an accountant that they like better. And so a lot of accountants come to me and say, see, it doesn't work. And I'm like, or let's challenge this. Maybe you could work on the relationship with the wealth manager. And it's honestly fascinating, because a lot of wealth managers, so Rory, true story, I know somebody in the wealth management industry. They got a call from somebody who teaches a course, and the title is How to Extract Referrals from Accountants. And they said, hey, what do you think? Should we have this person in? And I said, from an accountant perspective, that language sounds painful.
Yeah.
And one thing wealth managers don't recognize is that accountants are all about relationships. They're not out marketing. They're not out trying to find mass clients.
Yeah.
So if you're taking clients away, you're breaking that relationship, because they're going to go, ooh, nope, not sending clients your way.
Yeah. So back to Ron Baker a little bit. He talks about how he's trying to bury the time-based billing model.
Yes.
I'm trying to bury the referral model because I think it's antiquated, and I trademarked the term advise roar. I think you can see it here.
Yes.
Yeah. And the roar is not short for Rory. It's for return on relationship. And I believe as we move forward, that if we're doing right by the client and looking at their best interest, that we need to have a deep understanding of that person, so we can pull the levers, bring in a wealth manager when needed, right? Or bring in an estate planning attorney when needed, or bring in an international tax person when needed. And it's really understanding that client and their needs and helping them get to where they want to go. So I'm big on this return on relationship methodology, Jeff. And I think the accounting professional, the business model of churning out tax returns or financial statements, as we know, is going the way of the dodo bird.
We hope.
Yeah, we hope it is. It's especially with some of the private equity coming in the space and the technology advancements. We're just seeing a greater adoption of these future facing services. But I go back to the fact that the accounting professional can have an outsized impact on the lives of their clients, because they're the ones that are the financial first responders. They're working with people, helping them file taxes for the first time, helping them open up businesses for the first time. So we as wealth managers don't start working with clients usually until they have enough income or assets to be managed. And that maybe that doesn't happen until 40s or 50s, but it's the accounting professional who's really starting out with that client early on in that process that can really have that outsized impact.
I love it. And I love the return on relationship, because one of the things I found back in my accounting days, I asked the right questions. I was part of the right conversations. And when I partnered with my clients and said, okay, what challenges do you have? Okay, let's find the right professionals. I was always somehow dragged into the next conversation that led to the next project.
Yeah.
Whereas I know a lot of accountants, I used to hate this in tax season. They'd say, oh, I'm not taking clients, I'm only doing taxes. But it was like, what are you going to do the rest of the year?
Yeah. And that's the movement towards a year-round planning. I say you really shouldn't let the tax tail wag the dog. A tax plan should happen within a holistic financial plan. And with technology out there, it's becoming easier and easier to not only do the taxes, but the insurance planning, the investment planning, the estate planning. There's wonderful technologies in the estate planning space that are helping really connect generations. I think 60% of the population doesn't have an estate plan. And so in the wealth space, a lot of wealth advisors are leading with estate planning because it really incorporates all the assets, all the liabilities. It takes consideration family members, right, the generations, as well as extended family. It's a great way, I always say, to provide a family office level of care is to do estate planning. And for tax professionals, accounting professionals out there, they handle those businesses, they do the taxes. They're not too far away from being able to offer that estate planning in a holistic type way.
I love it. And so for me, I'm always about collaboration. And, one of the things I look at is who else does my client need to meet? And I add value by bringing that relationship together. Now, I'm going to ask you about the family office concept, because I feel like it's a well-kept secret.
It is.
And yet it seems so obvious to me that it should be in every, on every street corner.
Yeah.
Now the myth is, this is for the Gates family and, Warren Buffett and things like that, but you do a virtual family office. So tell me why that's different and why you believe that's important.
Yeah. So a family office historically was for those that had, let's say, 100 million or more. I mean, they still exist today. There's many of them. They're growing exponentially here in the United States because of the wealth creation. But really, a multi-family office deals with a number of different families. So providing services from financial planning to wealth management to estate planning to M&A to the tax and accounting side. And so I came up with this concept, or there's other folks that have been talking about it for quite a bit, but this concept really of a virtual family office. Because of technology, we can now connect these services and integrate the tax, the accounting, with the financial planning, with the insurance, with the estate planning to provide for the many business and personal financial needs of the client. And once again, going back to that relationship, Jeff, a business decision impacts a personal finance decision. Taxes touch businesses, they touch investments. These need to be making sure that they're working in concert with each other to really provide truly holistic advice that the client can make better decisions with regard to their business and their personal finances. So really the concept is connecting these, making sure that that you have all the data, have all the information. Then I use behavioral finance or the financial psychology of money, the financial therapy type of methodology to really understand the person's wants, needs, fears, and aspirations, so you can help them make better decisions because you understand them psychologically as well as emotionally. And the good news is, Jeff, I know we talked about this before we got on, is AI is able to uncover a lot of that information, your spending habits, right, where your income's coming in from, but you also need that human to ask those deeper, more meaningful questions.
Why did you do this? What's going on here?
Yeah.
Now, I want to pull out, you talked about holistic in there, because one of the things that used to cause me great pain was somebody would come to me and they'd ask for advice on their tax plan, and they'd want to know more about how they structure their estate, but they'd only want to talk about it in the context of their business. And I'd say, well, what about your portfolio? And they'd say, oh, my financial planner says he doesn't want you to know this. And I'm like, how do we make decisions?
Yeah.
If I only know that your portfolio is yielding 10% return, what's the risk level? And, I actually had one, you'll hate this, I think. He was in oil and gas. His retirement fund was in oil and gas, and his business was in oil and gas. And once upon a time, oil and gas dipped, and his entire life savings vanished overnight.
Yep. I mean, we should be looking at everything through a holistic lens, Jeff, because we can't have people making decisions in a vacuum and looking at this from a siloed service offering. We need to make sure that we're taking all the business, all the personal financial aspects into consideration. And so this holistic guide to wealth management, the book that I just wrote, really looks at all these different service offerings and then how they all work together to make sure that families and individuals are making the correct decisions, as well as businesses are making the correct decisions. But I kind of go back to the fact that we really need to understand the human. So holistic really is the services, but also when I go back to looking at the human and where they're at and where they want to go, their goals are, what their aspirations are. We ask some questions. I always say to folks when I'm talking to them or I'm coaching CPAs or advisors out there, we need to be the person that asks the right questions. Historically, the professions, financial advisors, accountants, were ones that prided themselves on having the answers.
Yes.
It's because we went to school, we took exams, right? We're supposed to be the person that has answers. And so we hung our hat on our knowledge. With AI now, we can look those things up in a matter of seconds and distill that information. It distills that information in a way that provides a lot of value. So what is our real value at? It's being that human. It's being that coach. McKinsey just did a study, said by 2030, the next 10 years, that we're gradually going to become life and business coaches that integrate health, that integrate wealth, that integrate people's businesses to really provide advice in that holistic way. There's folks out there that talk about how we need to ask questions about, what does our best hopes look like? If your best hopes were realized, Jeff, what would that life look like? And so when we start looking at asking the right questions, that we can then, like I said, pull the levers and give people proper advice to help them grow their business, grow their personal finances, or really just optimize their well-being.
I love that. And I think I would add a lot of accountants are trained to ask the questions they know the answers to.
Right.
Because it's really easy to look smart when you know the test and you know the questions that are going to be asked. So a lot of them want to be extra smart. Now let's talk about how you collaborate with accountants, because I do know there is that, I don't know why, somebody created the tension once upon a time, and I suspect it was somebody took a client away from an accountant and accountants decided all people are evil. But the reality is I come from a world where relationships are everything.
Yeah.
So what does your world look like? How do you as a family office work with accountants?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways. There's, I say 4 pathways really that accountants, CPAs, those professionals can integrate financial planning as well as wealth management services. And the first one, Jeff, is the historic referral model we just talked about that I believe should go the way of the dodo bird. That's, I'll scratch your back, you scratch mine. I'll send clients your way, you send mine. But that's not a relationship type of offering. And I think we need to go deeper. And if you have a specialized expertise in, let's say, taxes or financial planning or estate planning, you really need to have someone quarterbacking that relationship. And if you're an accounting professional and you're helping people with their businesses, you can start that conversation and introduce a wealth manager to handle the investment piece of things. And there's 3 ways you can really do that and get compensated. One would be to take a test. Series 65 is the test to become an investment advisor representative or a promoter. A promoter doesn't offer investment advice. It was formerly called the solicitor. I don't believe that's the best way to do it, because I'm a believer in really providing for that relationship. So that's Series 65 is an exam you take. You get compensated for sharing and sharing fees with that client. The next one is an investment advisor representative. So you pass the test, you become an investment advisor under the umbrella of a registered investment advisory firm, a wealth management firm, and they would handle their firm compliance, but you would have to do your individual compliance. And you can obviously take a lion's share of that revenue for that client. And then the last one would be to actually set up your own registered investment advisory firm that you take on all of the compliance. Obviously, that's a very heavy lift. And there's buy, build, and borrow type ways to do that. But we always tell folks out there, you want to crawl before you walk, before you run. And so partnering with an RIA like Arrowroot Family Office is a great way for you to work with clients and start offering some of these future-facing services, whether that's financial planning, the investment management, the family office services, whether that's governance, succession planning, to really provide a holistic family office level of care to that client.
I love that. And I think that's, for me personally, it gives me nightmares thinking about riding two horses, one in each of two heavily regulated industries.
Yeah.
I'd rather find a friend like you and just say, okay, Rory, how do we play together?
Right. Well, there's folks that are doing that. So we have people that are a part of Arrowroot here that are CPA and PFS. So get the PFS credential from the AICPA. So they are wearing those hats. So it's very doable. But I think the best way to do it really is to partner out there and start working, getting your feet wet, start working with clients. And once folks see the technology out there, it becomes an easy lift for them to start offering these services. We're not picking stocks anymore. Once again, this isn't investment advice, right? The software does a lot of the heavy lifting, and really, once again, it's becoming coaches, helping people from making wealth destructive decisions. For instance, on April 2nd, when the market went down because of Liberation Day, right? And some people may have just sold their stocks, right, and went to cash, but they may have not experienced that upside that just came back over the last 6 weeks. So really, the job of a wealth advisor is really helping people from making 3 to 5 catastrophic decisions when there's market turmoil. That's the value advisor. It's not picking stocks or anything like that. It's helping people stay invested, continue to save, build their wealth, and diversify their portfolios, and do the blocking and tackling to become successful. I think it was Charlie Munger said, boring is beautiful. It's not about picking the sexy stocks or putting them in sexy portfolios. It's really just doing the foundational stuff of blocking and tackling, helping people save and invest.
Yeah. Well, for what it's worth, when I had, back in the day when I was an actual accountant, my wealthiest clients were the boring school teachers who bought, and this is a Canadian concept, but they would buy bank stocks because at the time, this was a long time ago, bank stocks were doing these drip programs and they were consistently paying dividends. And they had the most boring portfolios. And whenever they get a new advisor, they'd be like, oh, we're going to diversify. We're going to do this. And the teachers would be like, nope. And it was amazing the wealth they amassed because it was set it, forget it. And it was so boring. They didn't even open
the power of compounding. It's the power of compounding, right?
Yeah. So I love that. Now, the other thing I would say, and this is, I want to come back to your advice to, crawl before you learn to walk or run. I'm going to be honest. A lot of accountants don't want to have those deep psychological conversations. So that's a good place where you can partner with somebody like yourself, because my advice from an accounting point of view, I happen to like those conversations. I also know that if you want to clear a room full of accountants, you say, we're going to talk about our feelings next.
Yeah.
They don't like to get into the psychology of it.
Yeah. Which they actually do a lot of times, Jeff, and they don't realize it. They're asking business owners questions about their business. Yeah. And that is, that's not necessarily any type of playbook. It's like, hey, look, where do you want to grow? How big do you want your business? What are you looking to do? You want to hire employees here? And so they do this stuff. It's just they don't have maybe the the reps from the personal finance side.
Yeah.
And that's why I developed the program. That's why I wrote the book, to be able to give them tools to be able to ask those questions. It's simple as really sitting around a campfire, Jeff, or talking on a Zoom call like we're doing right now, right? It's really just asking questions about life and meaning. And I think people do that, around a campfire, right? Or at a barbecue. And so when we realize that we could put it into a system, we can then help them make better decisions with their business or their personal finances. Do they want to IPO, or heck, do they just want a lifestyle business and enjoy time with their family and friends?
I love that. And I think, for what it's worth, I love being the accountant in the room. When back in the day, I used to always bring in other advisors to talk to my clients, and I couldn't be there without learning something. And what I found was it allowed me to understand my clients better, and then it allowed me to understand my partners better. So then I could bring everybody together. And one of the things I would stress for the accountants, you want to be in those rooms.
Yeah.
Even if the topic is over your head and you don't understand it, at least you're part of the conversation.
Yes. I agree. And, the American Psychological Association continually puts money as the number one stressor for folks out there. And the professionals on the accounting side are the ones that many times are being asked questions, that impact their lives, putting their kids through college, right? Saving up for retirement. And so to have some of these tools, you'll have those conversations that aren't necessarily technical, but maybe more the transformational, like Ron Baker says, can just provide greater value. They'll retain clients. You'll get, it's a referral strategy, get more clients to have them introduce you to more folks like them. And so it's just a deeper way to have a relationship with your clients that's meaningful and rewarding.
Well, and from my back in the day, I knew my clients inside out. I knew their kids. I knew their kids' relationships. I knew who was having kids. I knew who couldn't have kids. I mean, I knew who was getting divorced before they often knew.
Yes, exactly.
You have these conversations anyways. Why not put it into a context?
Yeah, that's the intimate knowledge that we as financial professionals have with our clients. They may not be able to talk to a business partner. They might not be able to talk to their spouse or their partner about their finances for fear, right? But they come to us and tell us those intimate details about their business, about their personal finances. So we need to be equipped to be able to answer those questions and help them, guide them along the way, or ask the right questions so they can unearth them for themselves.
I love that. And I think I'm going to credit Jay Abraham. He says, if you can solve some of these problems, you have a moral obligation to do so.
Yes.
I firmly believe, especially today, and I've been in Ron Baker's camp for a long time. Let's kill the billable hour. Let's let taxes go away.
Yes.
There's ways, back in the day, you needed a pencil and a lot of education. Now, a lot of tax work can be done by computers. Happily let that work go, because what really matters is the person in front of you.
Yeah. It's advising that business owner, it's advising that business, advising that person on their personal finances. That's the future advice. And as I've outlined here, we need to have these things working in concert with each other so we can help clients make great music for themselves.
Now, you are a sports fan. I'm aware of that. So I'm going to use an analogy. A friend of mine, he loved sports statistics, and it fascinated me because he could tell you every player in every league, whoever did anything. And I'm like, who are you cheering for? And he's like, oh, I don't actually watch live sports. And I was like, wait a minute. That's kind of like accounting. You do the tax return, you're looking backwards. And my question is always, how do you steer a business looking in the rearview mirror?
Right. You can't.
So let's talk about the sport. I think back in the day, I have a friend who likes to talk about the Chicago Bulls and the history of Michael Jordan. And I'm going to be honest, I get in over my head very quickly. But at one point, you always had the team that had the star player, and they didn't win championships because it could, your opponents could defend around it.
You need that supporting cast to be able to make a winning team there.
I think a lot of accountants, they're like, if I can't be the star player, I don't want to be on the team. But sometimes you need to recognize that there's a time for you to be on the bench, time for you to be on the field.
Yeah. And I think maybe they can think of themselves as a facilitator because, like I said, they are the financial first responders. They're working closely with those folks. They can facilitate those conversations and be the point guard, be that Magic Johnson, be that John Stockton, and start passing the ball to others. But they can be the one that's conducting the offense there, as well as the defense, right? And helping orchestrate those discussions, those conversations, and then putting it all together to making sure that it's working, together.
I love it. Now, I'm going to ask you 2 hard questions. The first hard question, where can people go to learn more about you, your book, your many, many, many passions?
Well, you can always reach out to me on LinkedIn, Jeff. So I'm on LinkedIn pretty heavily. And then the book landing page is adviseroar.com. So that's ADVISROR.com. You can also buy the book on CPA Trendlines.com, and that's in their shop there. So CPAtrendlines.com/shop. It does have a heavy price tag, but I'll have some promo codes that we can put into this episode. And then you can always reach me via email. My email is rory@arrowrootfamilyoffice.com.
I love it. And I would encourage accountants, if you're listening to this, honestly, Rory, they're probably not, but accountants, if you're listening to this, reach out. Rory is great. I would say, though, for the visionary entrepreneurs who I know are listening, reach out to Rory because, sorry, accountants, close your ears. If your accountant isn't talking about things like relationship and team, you need to be nervous because are they doing all the things you need? Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, so yes, I think yeah. Well, they just need to ask themselves: am I getting advice that's working in collaboration with each other? So I think for folks out there, do they have a team of advisors or an organization that's really looking out for their business and personal finance needs? If not, they can always contact me. I can go put them in the right direction, point them in the right direction. But I think for the entrepreneurs out there who are heavily focused on their business and building something special, that is part of having good advice out there to help them grow their business and have great outcomes.
I love that. And I think this is my advice, not Rory's, but if you're getting siloed advice today, you got to be really nervous because, the days when you could just get tax advice and say, okay, I'm done. Now there's so many things that impact that. Yeah. Now, my final hard question, Rory, you've got some mileage, you've got some experience. Looking back, what would you tell your younger self? What do you wish you knew then that you now know?
So I picked up improv, Jeff, in my mid-30s. It was a public speaking type of exercise, and I was mortified going on stage and trying to build out worlds from just a suggestion. But it taught me a few lessons. One was, and it's a main tenet of improv, is saying yes and. So, saying yes and to that meeting, to that date, to that trip, to working with somebody, because you never know how the universe will reward you, but you got to continue to take chances in life. It also taught me to be okay with failing. So I tell my younger self failing is okay. You're going to learn some lessons from failing, take chances. So, I would say that, continue to take chances, be okay with failing, and you'll grow from it. So those are the 2 things I'd probably tell my younger self, is saying yes and to things and be okay with failing.
I love that. And honestly, it's amazing how many entrepreneurs I know who took improv. And I'm not sure if improv leads to entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs lead to improv, but I think the yes and mindset is very instrumental in the resilience we need to keep getting up and trying new things.
Yes. I believe that everybody should write their books, should potentially do therapy, but if everybody did improv, oh my gosh, the world would be a fun and funny place.
Okay, we need to have an entire episode just on improv. Yes. So no, I'm going to wrap up now. I want to be mindful of your time. So if everybody wants to hear about improv, they're going to have to beg Rory to come back.
Yeah.
And by the way, I do find that entrepreneurs are really, really obsessed with improv. We tend to be quicker witted and funny because we are literally everything we do.
Well, I didn't say it was funny, Jeff.
Everything we do in business, there's an element of we're making it up as we go. And it's like, oh, this works. Let's do more. That didn't work. Let's do less of that.
Yeah, totally. For sure. We can improv our way through business and improv our way through life. Just roll with the punches there, Jeff.
I love it. Well, Rory, it was a lot of fun. Thank you for being on the show and hanging out with me.
Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.